Good evening, and it's a, what is it, Thursday evening, yeah, Thursday evening, and tonight I've decided to take one of the calipers off of Mediocre, my GSXR 1000, because the, undone that prematurely, didn't I? Not so much on this one. There's one seal that's starting to come out, one of the dust seals, and there's a couple on the other one, and as I'm changing one, I'm going to split it and change the whole lot. So I'm going to renew all the seals on both the front calipers. So first of all, I'm going to take off the pipes. Okay, so I've pulled the main pipes off. I've wrapped a blue glove around it and then loads of tape around it to hopefully hold some of the fluid in the system, so it's not as bad when I come to actually bleeding the system. So now I'll make some room, get the caliper on the bench and start working on it. Okay, that's it on the bench, and it's still full of fluid, so this is going to create a bit of a mess. I'm going to take off the nipple and just get a jug or something to tip this in. That's with all the pistons pushed back in. That's the majority of it out. That'll do. You got to understand you're going to make a mess. So just prepare for the mess. So we've got a Allen key of 6mm. Yeah. This is where you think, do you know what, perhaps I should have left it on the bike clamped up and just pinch these off. Oh. Yeah, they don't want to go. More leverage, that's what you need. I think all the bolts are the same size. As I go through, I will check. This is the end. Obviously your bleed nipples there, your activation pipes, your brake lines bolt into there, and I think this is where your only fluid track is. This is yeah, that's just bolts going through there and flat bits of brake caliper. This is where you've got your oil way running through. So if any of the bolts are going to be different, it'll be down this end, but I'm pretty sure they're all the same size. Yes, all the body bolts are the same size. There you go, that's in 2 halves, and that's where the oil flows to get to the other side to push these pistons out. And as you can see, there's no fluid going through this. These are just solid ends on the bottom of the caliper. So you need to replace it. Well, you don't need to, it's up to you, isn't it? it'll be your caliper you're doing, but I'm going to swap that out. That is particularly crushed and nasty. That's the new one. Bit of a difference, if the camera would ever focus, but yes. So that will get a new seal in there. Don't need that. And then we just need to start, or I just need to start getting the pistons out, which is what this tool's about. There you go. There's one. Just tip the oil away, or fluid. It's not oil, is it? Brake fluid. Flood. That looks quite clean.
Again, looks quite clean.
And you don't want to be grabbing, again, if you want to grab these with pliers, you crack on. They're your pistons. The inner section here doesn't matter too much. This just pushes out against the brake pad. So long as this face here is relatively flat, or flat, that's okay. Inside there, you can scratch that up if you want. Doesn't really make much difference to the braking. This outside face, you definitely don't want to be marking that, because all you'll do is create chips and divots in that with your pliers, which will then just go on to ripping your new brake seals apart. Your brake O-rings, seals. We'll stick with seals. So, as I say, it's up to you. If you're doing your own one, then that's down to you. This particular 6-pot caliper is two 27mm pistons, or 4 27mm pistons, and two 24mm pistons. The other 6-pot is, I believe, is 3 27mm pistons. So yes, let's try and get the other ones out. You can never have enough bits and pieces on your bench. Just tip some of that oil out. That's it, all 6 pistons out. I'll get the old seals out, which don't look too bad. This one's a bit twisted and crusty, so that had started binding up and coming moving with the piston. And that one is a bit deformed. Right. Yeah, it's definite oxidization, easy for you to say, oxidization underneath, which all wants cleaning out, so the seal, the new seal, will sit properly. I've had no leaks from the brake, so I believe all these actual hydraulic seals, brake fluid seals, are all alright. Looks and feels alright. That one's come out a bit too easy. Yeah, again, there's lots of oxidization in there. It just pushes the seal out, which pinches the piston more, then it sticks to the piston and the piston pushes it out. Something like that. That one's not too bad. Yeah, all the actual hydraulic seal seats are quite nice on that side. Yeah, the worst one is that middle one that was a bit more troublesome getting out with the piston pliers. All of it. That one's quite nice and clean actually. Very surprising. This one in particular, but both of these are full of filth. Right, okay. Now to clean the seats up, and then to clean the caliper up, and then to blow the whole thing out with loads of stuff. What stuff? Air and brake and clutch cleaner. But first, Dremel with a wire brush, I think. Or a bit of tissue. And I don't want to be leaving anything in this at all. They always aren't tiny as such. This is probably your smallest oil way, where it goes through the body, but behind the actual pistons they're quite big holes. But nevertheless, I don't want bits of tissue or rag, or indeed bits of oxidization, chips and lumps hanging about in there. So just getting the excess fluid out at the moment. As I say, I use a Dremel with a brass wire brush attachment, and you just got to make sure, because they just destroy themselves, and the wire bristles just end up anywhere and everywhere. And again, don't want them left in the caliper. So there's the device, just a Dremel. It's a very soft brass brush, and as I say, the bristles come out of this really easily, so you just have to be careful. Well, you don't. You do what you want. I'm gonna be careful. One, not to get it in my eyes. I've got my glasses on, so got a bit of protection there. And two, not to leave it in the caliper. Right, I'll clear this out. Okay, so that's pretty much that half done. There is residue of shit in the bottom there. Well, in all of them there's bits of shit. But all I'll do is use a load of brake cleaner and go over to my airline and blow all that out. But as for the oil seals, the seats are lovely and clean, ready to accept new ones. I keep saying they're lovely and clean, then I tilt it forward and tip some more shit in there. But all the oxidization has gone. It's all cleaned up. So I'll do the other side, which will be exactly the same process. So again, as you can see, how filthy that is in there in comparison. Hopefully you can see the difference. All that yellowing and that on this one is all the oxidization. Whereas that one, there's a few black bits in there, but that's just dirt that wants blowing out with the airline. Lovely and clean. And the surfaces, especially for the seal, the little oil seal that goes here between the two halves, that face is lovely and clean, and the two mating faces of the two halves nice and clean to get that nice tight clamp between the two. So I'll get on and do the other half, and then I don't know, next time you see me I'll probably be at the air compressor. Here I am at the compressor, and all I'm going to do here is spray on brake cleaner in shitloads of amount and then blow it out again, taking the dirt with it, hopefully. And that's that, two shiny halves of a brake caliper ready to go back together. Without leaking, hopefully. Cool, back to the bench. Right, now that the caliper's done, just want to check the pistons, which seem, apart from this top edge, a little bit of oxidizing. So you can give them a good clean off. Okay, so that's the pistons all cleaned up. Now tidy some of this dirty stuff away and get ready to rebuild. Yeah, I had a bit of a nightmare with a nipple out of a cheap kit a little while back on my Hayabusa. Everything went well, the seals fitted beautifully, it all sealed really well, excellent. Went to bleed it up and couldn't bleed it, and I went through about nearly 4 litres of brake fluid trying to bleed it up, until I discovered that the new nipples that I'd put in, the thread was just too small, too big, whichever you want, well, probably too small, and the air was being able to come through past the threads and being sucked out by the Mighty Vac, which was leaving air in the system, and the majority of the bubbles I was getting out was what was bleeding through past the threads. So all I did when I thought about it was change back to the old nipples, and it sealed perfectly and bled up fucking absolutely brilliantly. So if you do get problems, it might be your nipples. So I've just given that a quick clean up, and that will be going straight back on the caliper. I have got new ones in the kit, but having had some fun previously, I'm not going to play. I mean, look at that, straight away it's a different length. I know it doesn't matter because a lot of this thread is showing outside the caliper anyway, but yeah, I'm not going to trust it. That's up to you. Had a bad go. There's my story, sad but true. I'm using my old nipple. Deal with it. Okay, so the actual kit I have gone for is from Brake Masters, who are actually saying they're as good as OEM. So that's who I've gone with. So your big thick ones are for your brake fluid seal, so they go in your inner recess, and then for your top recess is the thinner ones, which is your dust seal. but it's quite self-evident because they are obviously different widths in the caliper itself. So I'll stuff some of them in, and that's .4, and make sure your bike is .4. You can't stick .4 and .5 together. Apparently, I don't know what with .5 is, it a silicone base or something, and it goes disgusting and clogs everything up. So don't mix your fluids. This is a .4 system, so I'm putting .4 back in it. I don't want to upgrade to .5. I don't know what it is with .5. Is it more heat resistance or something? You get less brake fade. So you race bike owners, you nutters out there, you hoodlums, you'd probably know. That's better. Just went in a little bit twisted, and the seals themselves don't feel like they fit properly, and they're too loose on your pistons. But once they go in the recesses is chamfered, is at an angle, so it actually brings one edge out, which is the grip on the piston. There you go. Seated quite lovely. That's the 24mm, a couple of the big ones. Again, as you can see, two different sizes. Bigger one being the fluid seal. There you go, shove some pistons in, and you shouldn't need much pressure at all. Just make sure they're lined up nicely. Because any excess oil that you've put on the pistons that don't actually want to come back out, any excess oil that you've put on the pistons, when you push them in, it will just push it to the surface. I'll get the worst of it off now, and then when it's back together, I'll give it a good clean down with brake cleaner again. Something like that. So all it's left to do, stuff them back together, just making sure that this seal seats nicely in there to hold them together. In fact, it'd be better having that one there. This is the threaded portion, so put the two together. Beautiful. Okay, that's it all back together. Need new grease nipple, and there's new dust caps as well, so I'll stick one of them on. It's the least I could do. There you go. That's it back together. As I say, I'll give it a blast over with brake cleaner, watching out for this hole now. I don't want anything going in there. Give it a bit of a clean up, stick it back on the bike. First of all, let's find out the torque settings and do these bolts up properly. And the Bible says front brake caliper body joining bolts 21 newton meters. They was definitely stiffer than that coming off. There you go, 21 newton meters. Okay, I'll plug that hole up. I think I've got a spare banjo bolt laying around, as you do, and give it a good clean up. I'll probably regret, as I put it on the bike, not painting it, but I don't mind a bit of patina. Anyway, clean up. Okay, so I've done the other caliper and I've thrown them back on and I've cleaned them up, but it is very ingrained, the shit. I left them in penetrating oil overnight to try and get into the dirt, but that's had no effect. So realistically they want a paint job, and I'm missing the bike being on the road, so I'm not going to do it. I'm not. So the outsides don't look too bad. Made one mistake. In there is one of the original washers plus the 3 copper washers. In there, yeah. So you got 3 copper washers. Didn't notice that washer. It didn't fall off when I did the caliper, and it stayed in place all through the changing the seals and all the rest of it. Didn't notice it at all on there. It's a silver one, and it's the top area there is silver anyway. But I should have looked, and I didn't, and now I've got a leak. It's very slight. Overnight I've had the brake lever cable tied back, which has obviously left the pressure on all night. So yes, so I've had the brake lever pulled in and held in with a cable tie, which usually gets rid of some of the bubbles that could be hidden up in your master cylinder and further down in the lines. So I've left that overnight, and being that the system was under pressure overnight, it's shown me there was a leak here, and on further investigation I have indeed found that I've left that bloody washer in there. So now I've got to take this off, take that washer out, put it back together, bleed the air out the whole system again. Beautiful. And then hopefully this time it will bleed beautifully. To get them to this stage, all I've done is put the lines on and undone the bleed nipples and let the system gravity feed. So just take them off until all the air stops coming out, till it stops bubbling. Did the left hand side one first and then came back to this right hand side one, which apparently is the way to do them. Yeah, but just leave the nipple out, and obviously make sure you keep an eye on the reservoir, keep it topped up. You don't want it going lower than the feed pipe, or else you'll just introduce an air to it again, which is no good. Also, I was having trouble bleeding it, so I cracked off, where is it? Cracked off this banjo, and as I cracked it off, I pulled the brake lever in. Hell of a mess, brake fluid everywhere, tightened it up, and sometimes you'll get air bubbles in your master cylinder which don't want to fucking travel anywhere, and that can release them. So I've done that. I've got no bubbles coming out, but it was still spongy, and I think with this leak going on here, hang on, yeah, there was no air coming out the system, and I think with this leak here it's just remained spongy. Although because I was gravity feeding the fluid in, I've put wooden blocks inside the calipers, so I can pump the brake when I was bleeding it without worrying about the mess going all over my brake pads. and I'm thinking that the pistons are actually bouncing back off the wood. Hello. Because it will crush so wood will crush so much. Where is it? Because the wood will crush so much, and then it'll have a certain amount of spring back to it. So I think that's what's keeping the brake spongy. As I say, I can't detect any air coming out, but now that I've got to redo that banjo and take that bloody washer out of the way, asshole, I'm going to reintroduce loads of air anyway, so I'll have to do all that again. But there you go, that's how far I've got. And as I say, now I'm going to undo that banjo and take that bloody washer out. Right, a bit of brake cleaner on it. Clean it all off. Top up the reservoir and see if I get a leak. As I say, with the pads in there instead of the bit of wood, I'll be ruining a decent set of brake pads, so hence the wood being between the pistons. That looks good. Alright. Take the lid off that. So that's the bleed pipe on. I'm just going to crack the nipple and pump the lever and see if I'll get anything out, because there's definitely air in the system now. Okay, so I think I found the offending article that was making my banjo connection leak. It's this washer, which up the top there's a dent that bridges from one side to the other, which would allow fluid out. And there's also a scratch down the bottom there, which could also, I don't know whether the camera's picking this up, but there's a scratch that goes again from the inside to the outside, which could again allow fluid to escape. What have I done? I've put in a new washer, I've tightened it all up, and again pump the lever, put a cable tie around it, and I'm getting nothing out of it. That's been left for about an hour and a half now, and I'm getting nothing out of it, whereas before it was quite obvious, the leak. So I think that's sealed up, so I can go back to bleeding the system out again. It's too much fun. Right, I'm going to start the wrong side. This is where everything went on, so I'm going to open up the reservoir, master reservoir, and pump some of it out of here, see how I get on, and then I'll swap to the main one. Definitely no leakage out my banjo setup now, so I'll do a couple more this side and then I'll get on with doing it properly from the other side. starting to definitely get a bit of a lever there. I'm going to swap back to this one. I don't seem to be getting anything out of this one, so I'm going to swap back to this one and see if there's any more in there. See how that gets us. Okay, it's remaining a bit too spongy for my liking. There's definitely no leakage around there. Or on the far side, so I think I'll set up my Mighty Vac and see if that makes a difference. Well, that's up to pressure, so it's taken a while and a lot of messing about, especially with this washer being crap, but there you go. So next thing to do, take the blocks of wood out and rebuild the wheel and stick it all back together. But that's what I do when I'm bleeding. That's what I do when I'm bleeding the brakes from pretty much an empty system. So just gravity feed. Just undo the nipple and let it gravity feed until the worst of the bubbles stop coming out, both sides. And again, starting with the left one, moving over to the right one, and then going through and bleeding it out, whether that's with a Mighty Vac or just pumping the lever. And as I say, that has taken a little while. Has taken about a litre of fuel, litre of DOT4 oil, brake fluid, and it has been a pain. And you've seen the edited version with no screaming and shouting, so probably something to be thankful there. But that's that. As I say, probably the next video I'll do will be rebuilding the wheels and removing the blocks of wood, obviously, and getting the brake pads and everything put back together. So that'll probably be in the next video if that's something you may be interested in, something to watch out for. But there you go, that's my brake system done according to this video. Perhaps see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Ta-ra.